Now we're going to be talking about constraints and adding them in to our applications. What constraints basically do is they get the objects on the screen and they resize them for the different screen size. And this allows you to create one screen for all the different types of devices you're creating your application for. So for example, if we created our application on the larger iPhone screen, as you can see here, the 5.5, which is the iPhone 6 Plus, let's say I dragged in a few buttons now. I'm going to add 3 in all together. There we go. So they fit perfectly. And we build and run on the iPhone 6 Plus simulator and it will look just like we created it in our interface builder. But you can see here, I've selected the iPhone 4S and I'm going to go build and run and to show you how it looks. And as you can see, as it's a smaller screen size, our buttons don't center, and you see the screen has cropped itself to a much smaller proportion and the buttons don't resize themselves. They still work, you can still select them, but it just doesn't look good. Meaning in past previous versions of iOS's, sometimes you would have had to create an additional set of storyboards just for solely different screen sizes, but with the addition of constraints you can now add in constraints to allow these buttons to adjust themselves to look just as good and exactly similar to they do on bigger screen sizes, look exactly the same but fit smaller screen sizes. So how we add constraints is pretty simple. We select our object and we right click or control click and drag it over to the side where you want to link up the connection. So we're going to get all 3 of these buttons and add in the same constraints. So we're going to link them all to the left of our view. There we go there. And then we're going to link them all the way to the right. So now they are linked up to both sides of our view. So no matter how big or small the sides come in or go out, our buttons will stretch. And we can't just leave it there because we still have a few errors. So we need to link up our button to the top of the view so it knows where its positioning is. And our button below, we need to link it to the button above or the object above with some vertical spacing. And the same goes for our third one. So no matter where our first button finishes, our second button knows where to start, and same goes for our third button. So that gets rid of all the errors there, and we've added in some constraints. So if we go to build and run now on our smaller screen size, you can see now that on the smaller screen size, the buttons have resized themselves using the constraints, and now they look just the same as it does in the iPhone 5.5 inch interface builder or the iPhone 6 Plus screen as it does on the smaller one. Now it doesn't just stop there. If I bring up our assistant editor, you can go to automatic and change it to preview main.storyboard, and then this will bring up a live preview of our view in a different screen size. So automatically it's selected on the iPhone 4 inch screen. Now if I got rid of that and increase or add in a new one, let's go for the smaller one which we got in the simulator. You can see how the view looks compared to the one we're designing on, kind of like a live preview. So if I added in a new button, now this button doesn't have any constraints in at all, and if I space that over, you can see with no constraints that's how it's going to look on a live preview. Now what we're going to do is work with different positionings. Now these buttons are positioned quite far over on the screen. So what we're going to do now then is scroll down and we're going to find some image views. We're going to place in an image view. Let's place it there and copy and paste it. So we've got 2. Now I'm going to space them in the center. So once in the center, I'm going to link them over to the edges and place those in. Right. So we've got these 2 new image views placed in and they don't have any constraints, and as you can see on the smaller live preview, they again overlap as they would because they're smaller screen size. So we do what we did with our buttons and creating our constraints there. Now because they're 2 side by side, we need to add some horizontal spacing. And then we need to link these up to the object above. If the object wasn't there, we'll link it to the top of the view. And we add in some vertical spacing. Same for both, vertical spacing. And then we need to select them and select aspect ratio to each of them because we want them to resize themselves. And then most importantly, we we need to drag one over to the side, and we need to have them to have equal widths. By adding in equal widths, it means whatever the attribute of our first one, whether it's aspect size, it's going to have equal widths to our second one. And by adding in those equal widths, it resizes themselves and fits them both on the screen, and you can see it looks just the same as it does on the larger screen. So we added the constraints all the way around like we did to our buttons. We added constraints or vertical spacing from both the image views to the button above, so it knows where to start down below when it finishes. We added some horizontal spacing in between the two image views, so it creates that gap in the middle. We set them to have aspect ratio, so no matter how big or small the screen gets, the height and width of our image views stays the same proportion. And we added kind of equal widths, so they stay the same size in widths. Not one of them is bigger than the other. That's how it works. And again, if we can bring up some labels now, we're going to take this one step further and add in some labels. So we're kind of creating like columns into our app now. So if I center that, and we're going to add 2 on each side. And with the live preview right next to us, it really helps us understand and how our application is reacting to these constraints. So we're going to start with linking our ones on the left. There we go. We're then going to create some a link to the top here to vertical spacing to both of these, and the label above vertical spacing. And then you can see as it's live previewing our labels now to the left. We're going to link these to the right. And again, add the vertical spacing in to the objects above them. And by doing this now, our labels should be now both linked on left and right, but we need them to be linked together in the middle and centered. So what we do is we link them together with some horizontal spacing. There we go. And then we want them to be able to have equal widths. So we select equal widths and them to center. And again, we select equal widths for both of these. There we go. Now we're not going to add aspect ratio to these, or we didn't add them to the buttons, as because the height or is going to stay the same no matter what. The text is not going to get bigger. It's just the width of it. So if you wanted to make it, you could add aspect ratio to make them bigger and smaller, but they don't really need them. It's only the image views because they're quite large, big boxes. But we've added constraints there, and it fits in nice and perfect. And our live preview, it says it fits nice and perfect, but if you want to double check, you can go to build and run on the simulator. Now, the image views won't appear because there's no images in them. So at the moment, it just stays blank, but what I can do to just reassure you that they're there, I could go down and add a background color of grey. So when we go to build and run, you just have nice grey boxes so you can clearly see them. So there you go. So there's our image views in there, and there's our buttons all placed out and our labels on either sides. So that's how you add constraints into your application to allow larger screen sizes to work on smaller kind of screen sizes. And you can get rid of this live preview and you can change it up to, let's say, the 4-inch, and it looks just as fine. And even go for the 4.7 inch, which is just underneath the one we're working on, and it looks just fine. So you can test them out on all different screen sizes within the preview of our main.storyboard, and test them out on the simulator just to double check it is working. But throughout the course, we're going to be adding in objects further and more in depth, and we're going to be using constraints further on, such as pinning objects like our web views or our map views, but we get further onto those further on in the course. So you can take these constraints and take them back to our previous lecture where we created our first Hello World application, add the constraints to the view, and you're able to convert it from not only a sole iPhone application, but for universal over all different screen sizes and even onto iPad. You just have to remember, when you're creating your views, always add the constraints to the largest screen size so it can resize itself all the way down, rather than stay in the middle and go up or down. Start with the largest, and it's easier to work going smaller than it is going smaller and bigger, as it can get a little bit confusing. But there we go. That's simply how we add the constraints in our applications to allow them to work on different screen sizes, and how to adjust the behavior of the objects in the view. So now our first section has come to an end. We move on to our second section where we start to understand simple functions within iOS development.